They put a lien on my house like it was a parking ticket. 30 days later, I watched the president of the Homeowners Association get handcuffed in front of a packed room. And the wild part is, my property was never supposed to be under any HOA rules in the first place. I'm Jack Mercer, and I live in an old Victorian that's been in my family longer than most of the luxury homes around me have had plumbing. My place sits on the edge of Cedar Ridge Estates, one of those neighborhoods where every mailbox looks cloned and the lawns are cut like a golf course. I'm not anti-neighborhood. I'm not that guy. I wave, I keep my yard decent, I don't blast music at midnight, I just like my home the way it is: creaky porch, original railings, and yes, a paint color that doesn't match 27 shades of approved beige. The first time I met Melissa Hartwell, she didn't introduce herself like a normal human being. She walked up my steps in a white blazer, like she owned my address, held out a clipboard and said, "You're in violation." Not "Hi, I'm Melissa," not "Welcome," just "Violation." Then she dropped the real bomb. "You owe $12,000 in overdue HOA fees. If you don't pay, we'll file foreclosure." I actually laughed because it sounded like a scam call. "Ma'am," I said, "I'm not in your HOA. I never joined. I never signed anything." She smiled like that was cute. "You're a member now, sweetie. We have the documents, officially." And right there, standing in my doorway, I felt that cold, quiet kind of fear. Not panic, not drama, just the realization that someone was holding paperwork like a weapon and my house was the target. The next day, the mail started. Certified letters, heavy envelopes, formal language seals, and final notice stamped in red like it was supposed to make me roll over. They listed violations that made no sense for a home built before half these rules existed. Mailbox not compliant, welcome mat not approved, paint color not on the pallet, flower bed encroaching, railing unsafe unless replaced with a modern standard. They even cited my porch that's been there since the 1920s, like it had just appeared overnight to offend someone. I called the number on the letter because I'm not stupid, I verify things. A man answered tight, annoyed voice and told me the fines would continue to accumulate daily. When I asked for proof I was a member, he said, "It's in the file. You can request it in writing with a processing fee." A processing fee, to see the thing that supposedly gave them power over my property. A week later, Melissa came back, this time with a guy named Derek Slade, big shoulders, mirrored sunglasses, the vibe of someone who enjoys tow trucks. He stood at the curb like a bouncer while Melissa marched up with a new stack of paper. She held one page higher than the rest like it was a trump card. Here she said, "Your signed agreement, dated 1982. I stared at it and my stomach did this slow drop, because at first glance it looked real, my grandmother's name, a neat signature, a date. Then the details hit me. The ink looked fresh, the paper was too clean, and the biggest problem, my grandmother died in 1983. Yes, but Cedar Ridge Estates didn't even form their homeowners association until years after that. I pointed at the date, then looked up at Melissa. "So you're telling me she signed into an HOA? That didn't exist yet." Melissa didn't blink. "Records are records," she said. "If you want to dispute it, do it in court." And Derek, standing there like a statue, muttered, "Pay up or pack up." That's when the situation stopped feeling like a misunderstanding and started feeling like a shakedown. I tried the practical route first. I called attorneys. I emailed. I drove to offices. And over I got the same answer in different polite packaging. Conflict of interest. We represent the HOA. We can't take this case. By the end of the week, it felt like Melissa had pre-booked the entire legal system in my zip code, like she was reserving tables for a party. Then came the inspections. Every morning, like clockwork. Derek's truck would idle outside my house, diesel rumbling phone camera pointed at my porch. Photos snapped like I was under surveillance. One day I looked out, and he was literally holding a measuring tape to my grass. That afternoon, another violation notice appeared. Grass height exceeds standard by 0.25 inches, a quarter of an inch. I wish I was exaggerating. And here's the part nobody tells you about this kind of pressure. It isn't one big punch. It's 1,000 tiny hits. Paper cuts every day until you start thinking maybe it's easier to just bleed. I sat at my kitchen table one night with my retirement account open on my laptop, a stack of letters in front of me, and a calculator that kept giving me the same ugly answer. If I fought, I could go broke. If I didn't fight, I could lose the house. I didn't have a dramatic breakdown. I just stared at the wall for a long time, and I actually wondered very quietly if I'd missed something. Some old covenant, some filing, some fine print my family ignored. So I went back to basics. I pulled my deed. I pulled county records. I reread everything like I was studying for a final exam that could take my roof away. And that's when the first crack in Melissa's story showed itself. A week later, my neighbor Diane Brooks walked over with a folder so thick it looked like it belonged in a courthouse. Diane is one of those people who seems gentle until you realize she's been quietly collecting receipts for 20 years. "I heard what's happening," she said, like she was talking about a storm rolling in. "And I don't like it." Inside her folder were copies of contracts and vendor agreements, landscaping, towing compliance inspections, names repeated, addresses repeated. Derek's cousin owned the landscaping company. Derek's brother-in-law ran the towing service. The property management firm, A. Shell, with a mailbox address. Diane slid over a printed list of home sales in Cedar Ridge over the last few years, and my throat tightened. The same pattern over and over: elderly homeowners, sudden violations, fast liens, then a cash offer from a company tied back to Melissa. They weren't enforcing rules. They were harvesting houses. That night I drove out of town to meet a lawyer. Diane recommended Alicia Ramirez. Different county, different circle. Someone Melissa couldn't lock down. Alicia didn't sugarcoat anything. She said, "This looks like coordinated harassment. And that lien, if the paperwork is fraudulent, it's not just civil. It can get criminal." But we still needed something clean, something undeniable. Not just suspicion, not just patterns. And Diane, bless her stubborn heart, found it. Buried in an old insurance policy document from the 1950s was a line that made everything stop. My property, the Mercer lot, was permanently exempt from any future HOA covenants, fees, and liens due to its pre-existing status. In plain English, my house was never theirs. Then Alicia found something even uglier. A purchase agreement draft already filled out with my address, my name, and a lowball price that wasn't even close to market value. They'd already planned the sale of my house, before they'd even finished trying to take it. At that point, the emotion shifted. I was still angry, yeah, but the fear turned into focus. We started sending formal demands, requests for financial disclosures, requests for meeting minutes, requests for the chain of title. Every letter tightened the box around them because the more they responded, the more they exposed. And Melissa did what Karens like Melissa always do when they feel control slipping. She escalated. A notice showed up saying the Homeowners Association intended to petition for guardianship, claiming I was not competent to manage my affairs, basically trying to paint me as unstable so she could legally bulldoze me. That was personal. That was cruel. And it told me one thing: she was running out of moves. Alicia told me to show up at the next board meeting. "Be calm," she said. "Speak clearly. Let them talk." So I went. The community room was packed. Folding chairs, fluorescent lights, people whispering like it was a trial. Melissa sat at the front table with her little gavel, her little stack of papers, her little queen of the subdivision posture. She called the meeting to order and launched straight into me like I wasn't even a person, just an issue on the agenda. "Mr. Mercer is a threat to neighborhood values," she said. "Non-compliant, hostile, unstable." Unstable. She really leaned on that word. Then she announced loudly that she was taking steps to protect the community by pursuing guardianship. That room got quiet in a way that made my ears ring. I stood up slowly because the last thing I was going to do was give her the reaction she wanted. My hands were steady, even though my pulse wasn't. I said, "Before you vote on anything tonight, I want to ask you something." Melissa tilted her head like she was indulging a child. "Make it brief." I nodded. "Sure. Can you explain why your office was searched this morning at 9:15 a.m. by investigators? And why your association's accounts are currently flagged for fraud?" Her smile didn't drop all at once. It sort of cracked. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out fast enough to sound confident. And that's when a woman in a dark suit stood up from the back row, someone nobody had paid attention to until that second. She walked forward calm as a metronome and said, "Melissa Hartwell." Melissa tried to laugh. "Who are you?" The woman held up a badge. "Special agent." You could hear the air change. Melissa's chair scraped back hard. This is inappropriate. This is an HOA meeting." The agent cut her off, clean and sharp. "You are under arrest." Melissa started talking fast, too fast. "This is a misunderstanding. He's manipulating. But the agent was already reading rights and another investigator stepped in. Metal clicked. Wrist to cuff. Cuff to consequence. Melissa's gavel fell off the table and hit the floor with this stupid little clack that felt like the end of a whole era of bullying. She looked around for someone to save her board members, neighbors, Derek, anyone. Nobody moved. They escorted her out through the same aisle she'd strutted down for months like she owned the place. And I didn't cheer, I didn't smirk, I didn't say a word. I just stood there breathing, watching the power drain out of someone who'd been using paper and intimidation like a crowbar. Because sometimes justice doesn't look like a celebration. Sometimes it's just the sound of handcuffs and the quiet relief of getting your life back. Lesson: never assume a title, a clipboard, or an HOA letterhead means someone has the right to take what's yours.